What if the hardest part of losing a parent is realizing that you actually lost them years ago? And nobody tells you that the grief for a distant parent feels less like crying and more like standing in aisle 7 in Walmart, wondering why you suddenly feel weird. When my mother died, it was like someone had unplugged the sun. That sounds dramatic, but I was raised by a single mother who fought her way through life with one arm tied behind her back and almost no child support. My mother was my person. She raised me alone after my parents divorced when I was 5 years old. And for years, I saw my father as the villain in the story. The guy who left, the guy who checked out, the guy whose absence shaped everything in my life thereafter. Now, if you're somebody who grew up with ADHD before people really understood ADHD, especially if you're Gen X, school could feel like you were dropped into a maze. I struggled constantly. Focus, organization, emotional regulation, feeling stupid when I actually wasn't stupid at all. The whole deluxe package. And when you're a kid, you look around for a reason. My reason was him. I blamed my father for opportunities that I didn't get. I blamed him for my mother struggling. Sometimes Mom and I didn't have very much food to eat because there was no money. I blamed him for the exhaustion in our house because my mom had to work 2 and on occasion 3 jobs just to keep a roof over our head. I blamed him for every moment when my life felt harder than I thought it should be. And honestly, some of that anger was earned. He never wanted to be around me when I was a child. I would just get shuffled off to whoever my stepmother and step-siblings were. He was married several times. And the step-families would get the new clothes, the trips, and get to ride in new cars. When he was in between marriages, I was responsible for cleaning his apartment. But here's the weird thing that nobody brings up when you hit middle age and your parents start dropping. The story gets messier because as you get older, you stop seeing your parents as giant authority figures and start seeing them as exhausted human beings with damage they never healed from. And that realization is both freeing and deeply annoying because now you have empathy. Great, fantastic, just what I needed. Emotional complexity. I found out more about my father's childhood when I was older. Trauma, emotional neglect, abandonment, the kind of upbringing where feelings are treated like rats in the attic. Just ignore the scratching and maybe it'll go away. And the truth slowly crept in. He never wanted to be a parent. That sounds brutal to say out loud because we're trained to think that parents are supposed to automatically become warm and wise protectors the immediate instant a baby pops out. Well, my father told me that he didn't want to be a parent once. He was very angry at something a stepsister had done. And since I was the one left behind and didn't know what was going on, his anger was directed at me. He told me that he never wanted kids in the first place. Some people became parents because society expected it. Some were trapped into becoming parents. Some because they were emotionally unequipped, but nobody in their generation was allowed to admit that, especially men. A lot of men from that era were taught 3 emotions: anger, silence, and where the hell's the remote control? That doesn't excuse the damage done, but it does explain some of it. And explanation changes grief. When my mother died, I was devastated. I'd walk around crying in grocery stores. I'd hear her favorite song on the radio and dissolve into tears. But My father died recently. I didn't know what I felt. That's the part nobody talks about enough. People act like grief is always this clear, emotional movie scene where everyone sobs beautifully while the rain trickles down the windows. Sometimes grief is just confusion. Sometimes it's numbness. Sometimes it's feeling guilty because you think you're not devastated enough. And if you're in the sandwich generation now, trying to survive your own aging process, health problems, finances, adult responsibility, maybe kids or grandkids, while your parents decline at the same time, your emotions can become an absolute soup. You're grieving people who are still alive. You're grieving the parents you wanted. You're grieving your own lost years. And meanwhile, your joints sound like a bowl of Rice Krispies when you get up in the morning. It's not a very glamorous season of life. There's actually research showing that unresolved childhood relationships can make grief more complicated. Studies on complicated grief talk about how conflict, abandonment, emotional distance, or unfinished business can create reactions that don't fit the standard profile of mourning, because you're not just grieving the person, you're grieving the possibility that one day they would become the parent that you always needed. And when they die, that door is closed forever. That's the real punch to the chest. Not just they're gone, but this is never getting fixed. I think that realization hit me harder than his actual death. There was no magical final conversation, no Hollywood redemption scene, no him telling me, "I've always loved you, kiddo." Life is usually much less poetic than that. Sometimes people die as complicated as they lived, and then you're left sorting through emotional junk drawers, trying to figure out what stays and what goes. For a while, I felt almost ashamed that I wasn't more heartbroken. My mother's death shattered me. My father's death feels quiet, but quiet grief is still grief. And honestly, I think a lot of people in our age group are carrying this exact sentiment around without talking about it, especially people with childhood trauma, especially late diagnosed neurodivergent people, especially people who were raised by emotionally immature parents. Because when you spend your entire childhood trying to earn love, approval, or emotional safety, part of you still hopes that healing will still be coming someday. Then one day you realize, oh, that was the ending. Not the beginning, the ending. But strangely enough, there's also freedom in that. Once I stopped waiting for my father to become someone else, I could finally see him clearly, not as a monster, not as a hero, but as a damaged human being who passed his pain down like an inherited casserole dish that nobody wanted. And maybe maturity is realizing that two things can be true at once. Somebody can hurt you deeply and still deserve compassion. You can understand somebody and still mourn what they failed to give you when you needed it. You can forgive parts of them without pretending that everything in your childhood was fine. That balance has taken me years. And honestly, I'm still in the process of figuring it out. I think a lot of us are, especially now at this age. We're watching entire generations disappear while realizing that we ourselves are the older folks now, which is rude, frankly. One minute you're buying concert tickets and black eyeliner. The next minute you're discussing cholesterol numbers and estate paperwork. The emotional whiplash is unbelievable. But I will say this. If you've lost a parent that you love deeply, your grief is real. If you lost a parent you barely knew or had a contentious relationship with, your grief is real too. If your grief looks messy, numb, angry, relieved, guilty, confused, that's still grief. Human relationships are complicated. Families are complicated. Oh, are they complicated? Emotional childhood lasts forever, whether we want it to or not. And sometimes healing isn't about getting closure from them. Sometimes it's about giving closure to yourself. Thanks for watching. If this resonated with you, please leave a comment below. Or if you think you know someone that would be helped by seeing it, please feel free to share. Tell your story in the comments. We want to hear it. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the content. And I will see you in the next one.